You're listening to the 49 Carats Podcast, a 49ers Goldmine production with Stephanie Sanchez.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the 49 Carats Podcast. I'm your host, Steph. It is Monday, April 29th. The draft is now in the rear view mirror. We know all the 49ers picks. I don't know what to do with myself anymore. But no, in actuality, I mean, this is the second best part of the draft, is being able to now know who is on your team, kind of evaluate how they fit to the team, and, you know, just watch these guys and get excited about these guys now that they're on the 49ers. So joining me to react to the 49ers 2024 draft class, is always on a Monday, Weston P. Smith. Weston, how you doing, man?
I'm good. I like you, Steph, and wondering what I'm going to do over the next few weeks, other than probably spend too much time figuring out these new faces that have joined the team and what their contribution may or may not look like in the short term is what I'm most intrigued by. I'm not, and we'll talk about why and the 49ers draft philosophy, but that's what I was paying close attention to this draft for, was who has immediate impact. I'm not really worried about 26, 27 and down the line. I'm thinking about more the immediate. So I'll spend too much time doing that. But it was a fun weekend. It was nice to see the 49ers have their picks actually spread out across all 3 days. That was enjoyable.
Yeah, we were just talking before we went live how nice it was for the 49ers to have a first and second round pick. So definitely won't take that for granted going forward. But let's take a quick look at the 49ers picks. In round one, we had wide receiver Ricky Pearsall out of Florida. Round two, the 49ers traded down one pick to select FSU corner Renardo Green. In round three, they moved up to select an offensive lineman, Dominick Puni out of Kansas. Round four, they picked safety Malik Mustapha, and they had 3 round 4 picks. So then they moved up for running back Isaac Guerendo. They also drafted Arizona wide receiver Jacob Cowing. And in round 6, that was a big gap between rounds 4 and 6 for the 49ers pick. I believe Matt Barrows had mentioned that was a 4-hour break in between those picks. So that's crazy, because the media, they have to wait and sit inside the inside 49ers media room while these picks are happening. So big lull there for them. In round 6, 49ers selected a guard, Jarrett Kingston out of USC. And in round 7, linebacker Tatum Bethune from FSU. 2 FSU guys. So that's interesting. I guess they took a liking to them and that defense. But Weston, let's start off with the first guy. We got Ricky Pearsall out of Florida. I know the initial reaction, what the initial reaction of this pick was, not just for myself, but I think most fans. I think it wasn't surprising that the 49ers went wide receiver, right, with the first pick. I think in the couple of days leading up to the draft, you kept seeing wide receiver get mocked to them. And so I had a feeling there's some smoke here. There's probably some truth to the 49ers addressing wide receiver early. They did. The problem was it wasn't someone that I think a lot of people were expecting the 49ers to maybe select with pick 31. Ladd McConkey was there. You had Xavier Legette. And so I think that was kind of the first reaction to the pick was, oh, okay, that was a little early for Ricky Pearsall is kind of what people thought, including myself. But listen, the more I watched Pearsall, it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. And not only that, but I really like him as a player. I could definitely see what the 49ers liked in him as well. I mean, we're looking at the RAS score right here, and you just see out of 10 RAS score, he has a 9.91. So that just screams the athleticism that Pearsall has, that he brings to this offense. So, yeah, the more I watched him, the more I learned about him, the less I cared about where he was drafted.
First, guilty as charged. I had the same reaction you did, Steph. I had the same reaction.
Yeah.
Everybody did. Again, wasn't the position maybe at the time, in the moment, player name. And I think as we got closer to 31, first and foremost, I'm shocked because my bold prediction was they would not be picking at 31, period. Thought ample opportunity for them to slide up. Just the way the draft board was falling. Like when I think about and I know the 49ers and most teams don't draft on necessarily like position need, like, hey, that's the clear and obvious position we need the most help in, so that's going to be our first pick, right? Like whenever that might be. But I definitely had corner at the top of that list, and then it slides down to us, and 6 quarterbacks taken in the first 12 picks, 15 players in offensive players in the first 15 picks. I'm like, oh my god, like the defensive side of the ball is here for the taking. Whether it's D-line, whether it's corner, wherever you wanted to add that piece. But more about Ricky. Shocked by the player. I think there was other names that I might have pegged immediately. Actually, and not just saying this, pretty familiar with Pearsall's game, just because where I live on Saturdays and the window that I get an opportunity to sit down and actually watch college football tends to be either a Florida or a Florida State game, coincidentally, what's on television.
Nice.
So the more you think about it, the more you unpack it, the more you actually go back and watch, like this guy just feels like a San Francisco 49er. And I now understand the logic, because to me, I think there is potential short-term impact, but this really, if it comes to fruition, has long-term indication and value at the position for the 49ers, in my personal opinion. Like I love the guys. I love his character. Said all the right things. Watch all these interviews, even when they do the 5 fun facts. Like the guy just seems like he's got a lot of personality, understands it. I think that's going to help keep him out of the proverbial rookie doghouse that Shanahan finds these wide receivers in time and time again. And I start caring less about name to value assignment, because we talked about this. There's really only 20 to 22, 25, maybe first round grades given anyway. So if you're drafting a 31, by definition and by standards around the league, you're drafting a second round talent, right? So if that guy happens to be a later second round and you don't pick till later in the second round, and the way the board fell thereafter this pick, he wasn't going to be there when you picked again. You were going to have to make a jump up if that was going to get your guy. And I'm just a big believer in whoever your guy is, hang your hat on it. Hang your hat on it and go get it and prove to us why that's your guy,
Yeah, and I understand the surprise from fans and maybe initial disappointment, right? Because I think everyone looks at who was available there, and as Callie Young in the comments here says, Johnny Newton was their defensive tackle, and then also Powers Johnson, was there, and so definitely also to position. Well, I don't know if they really saw defensive tackle as a position of need, but I mean, the 49ers always say, we just draft good players, and sometimes it's not always based on positional needs. So there were good players there. I will say Newton fell, both of those guys, Newton and Jackson Powers Johnson, fell quite a bit, and they slid more than I was expecting them to. So it wasn't just the 49ers who passed on those guys. So that makes me feel a little bit better, I guess, in knowing that, okay, maybe there was something else like we're not really privy to on either of those guys. And, again, I think I see the fit with, Pearsall, and I definitely think, obviously, wide receiver was a need when you think about Debo and Juwan Jennings. Big chance they're not in a 49ers uniform past 2024, right?
Yep.
So I think given that, this makes sense. And I think a guy like Pearsall can, fill some of what Debo did. I mean, he could play inside, outside at times at Florida. Like, he was getting the ball behind the line of scrimmage. And so he was getting end arounds, he was getting screens, things like that. And so I also think Pearsall would probably be a consensus first round guy if he was in a better offense, if he had a better quarterback at Florida. Like, that stood out to me immediately when I went back and watched those games. I mean, he can get open. That's really not an issue for him. And so now having a quarterback who can throw to him, can throw to open guys, and who can, a coach who can, scheme things up for him. I think it's going to be great for Pearsall, and I'm excited to see kind of how he fits into everything. I think we see him get on the field this season. I don't know how often, right? But there's usually an injury or two, maybe like at least one game that maybe Debo might miss this season. Things like that. So I would expect to see Pearsall. And then another thing is the fact that he does have some experience, not a ton, but some experience returning in college. And again, with the rule change, I think it kind of makes teams a little more open-minded who they would consider as a return option. So now the 49ers kind of have a number of guys, and we'll talk about some other guys that they drafted who I think are intriguing options as well as far as the return game goes. But I understand the Pearsall pick, so I'm happy with it today.
I understand it. I'm happy with the player. I'm glad he's part of the 49er organization for the next potentially 5 years. But I think my bigger concern is Steph, what have I been saying on your show for weeks now leading into the draft? Like, don't care who the person is at 31, but if you're picking at 31, they have to be given an opportunity to contribute immediately. Yes. And while I like Pearsall and things point to the fact that he might have a shot. Like, he's not he's a young kid by world definitions, but he's not a young rookie who's played a lot of collegiate football. So he's an experienced player, and he's not a one-hit wonder, right, who did it for a single year. But my concern is, like, okay, let's take the hypothetical that Ayuk and Debo are both here to start the season, right? And they prioritize Jawan Jennings. Like, they prioritize him with that tenure that they assigned to him, because they knew teams weren't going to match it and they wanted to keep Jawan Jennings around. It's going to be hard to get Jawan Jennings off the field, no matter how you cut it, even if it just comes down to his pass blocking ability. And the 49ers don't traditionally run 4 wide receiver sets, like even to see 3 wide receivers out there the way their offense is. So I just think the opportunity for him to crack the field is going to be about an injury, right? Like, that's probably what's going to get him out there at wide receiver, is somebody's nicked up, somebody's banged up, and he might put him. I don't think he's going to be given the opportunity to outplay any of those guys in camp. Like, the 49ers are going to feel comfortable with the 3 that they trot out there. So that's it. I'm devil's advocate here, and this has nothing to do with Ricky. It just has to do with the receivers that are already on this roster, at least for this season. So to me, it's more like, what's the long-term impact here? And for me, 2 very enthusiastic thumbs up around Ricky Pearsall being a San Francisco 49er for a long time. 2024 season, I have my reservations in terms of like what the impact's going to be.
And yeah, that's not something that is specific to Pearsall, right? I mean, that's an issue with
that'd be any wide receiver
across the board. And not just wide receiver. It would literally be any position. You can have that argument of, well, is this guy even going to get the opportunity to get on the field? Because the 49ers pretty much have their starters set across the board. They have their starters. So, yeah, I mean, that's definitely a fair concern for some of these guys. And something that we'll talk more about in a bit is the fact that the 49ers, I think, whether it was intentional or not, they drafted a lot of guys with experience, a lot of experience. To me, that means you don't need to develop these guys. They're a lot of them are probably ready to compete right away, and that's what they need. They need guys to compete with their current roster, with their current starters, backups, immediate backups, right? So, yeah, I mean, I think immediately this probably spells the end of Danny Gray. Even Ronnie Bell is probably, his time is the counter on him has started as well. So, yeah, I mean, definitely seems like the 49ers are preparing to turn the page. And as Gris says, maybe the 49ers do run more wide receiver sets this year. I definitely wouldn't be surprised by that. But yeah, I mean, hopefully he does get an opportunity at some point this year. But of course, that is always the challenge for any of these rookies coming in. But let's move forward to the next pick. This was the 49ers second round pick, FSU corner Renardo Green. And I know, Weston, you were just talking about the fact that you get to watch a lot of the Florida teams by where you are. So Renardo Green was one guy that I didn't really watch a whole lot of prior to the draft. What I did see was, Brad of SF Niners. Shout out Brad, man. He grinds the tape leading up to the draft. And Renardo Green was one of the guys that he was kind of tweeting about often, saying, like, I don't understand how this guy is not getting talked about enough. Like, and so right when I saw that, and then I saw the 49ers draft him, I was like, oh, like, I'm excited about this pick because someone who I know knows ball, regards Renardo Green pretty highly. And then so after he got drafted, I got the chance to, of course, watch him. I'm watching all these guys currently. And I mean, I think it's pretty obvious. Press man, that's kind of like his specialty. He's best when he can dictate his space at the line. He can create his own leverage. One thing I love is that, I mean, he's covering a guy, but he'll have a receiver like real tight on the sideline. So that forces the quarterback to have to make a really tough throw, or the wide receiver to make a really tough catch. And even if they make the catch, there are a couple plays where I saw him like push the receiver out before he could get the feet in bounds. So just little things like that, just knowing the awareness to be able to cover, not just, sticking to a guy, but also putting him in a difficult spot to make a play. And then, of course, like the fact that he's in the SEC and he gets to play some tough receivers, a lot of guys who are NFL receivers today. I mean, he put on a masterclass against Malik Neighbors, out of LSU, one of the top wide receivers in this class. And he had a pick in that game as well against LSU. So I'm impressed. I'm definitely impressed. And while, again, Renardo Green, for anyone who wasn't familiar with him prior to the draft, I think it could have seemed like a head scratcher, in the second round, especially because you're thinking the 49ers need to go tackle, right? But I think corner was a need for the 49ers, just the same as wide receiver was, because there aren't a lot of guys in that cornerback room. While it's deep in 2024, beyond that, it's the Will Smith meme. There's no one in that room, So Renardo Green makes a lot of sense, and it seems like also they want to emphasize press man a little bit more going forward.
Yeah, I do think there's a changing of the guard or new elements of the defense that will be implemented under the new defensive coordinator, even the guys of Brandon Staley, chiming in. So I'm hopeful that we'll see more press man. I don't want this to turn into a scenario where you draft a guy who has a strength and you don't ask him to play to that strength. This is the pick, Steph, for me. When I look up and down the 8 picks they made, undrafted free agents, etc., this is where I do think there is an opportunity for immediate contribution and an opportunity to crack the lineup. I, like Brad, am enamored with Renardo Green. I think he's a plus athlete. I don't think his RAS score actually even gives him the full justification as to what his athletic ability is. He is this is about Leon Sandcastle. That's absolutely the best handle you could possibly have. I miss those commercials. That being said, like he, again, plus athlete, press coverage. You know who's good at press coverage, people? People with attitude, people that play with swagger and play with a little moxie, because you are out on an island, right? Like being a corner, that's why they called it Revis Island, right? Like you are out there alone in press man. Like you better get your hands on him or the whole world is going to see that you whiffed at the line of scrimmage on that person. So I love that mentality. I love the versatility of the player, experience at safety, experience outside corner, slot. What I want to know is what do the 49ers envision for him? And then that, like, I feel like I'll reserve like my full opinion of how he's going to fit when I see a little bit more of that. I love the player, love everything about this player. We'll talk more about another FSU player that, you know, some of my people are higher on than even Renardo, but Renardo's my guy that I think is going to have the opportunity to make an immediate impact. You hit the nail right on the head. A deep depth chart at the cornerback position, but minus Demo and Charvarius Ward, who's really going to play their way onto the field. And I think Renardo's going to be that guy. I think he's going to come over Yassine, Yedin, Womack, Luter. Like, I think this guy's going to pass. And based on what you just invested in him from a draft capital standpoint, the expectation should be that he's going to pass it. But here's going to be my overall theme. And again, I know what I want for the team is different than what the team probably wants for the team. I'm not naive to that. But we did talk about tackle as a need or offensive line as a need. And I didn't think it needed to be addressed at 31. It just needed to be addressed with those priority picks, rounds 1 and 2, in my opinion. But what do I know? The 49ers literally trade a spot back to the team that just beat them in the Super Bowl to go take a tackle that had been periodically linked to the San Francisco 49ers throughout the draft eval process, the tackle from BYU. And here's how I know that the 49ers don't agree with anything that we say in terms of what they need versus what they feel they need, is because when the Kansas City Chiefs called to make the trade to go up one spot, the 49ers, you bet your ass the first question the 49ers asked was, who are you taking? And the Chiefs gladly told them, because if they didn't tell them, they wouldn't do it at the risk of losing their player, right? Like, and if they had the same player, they wouldn't have done it either, you know? And so they weren't panicking. The first round felt a little panicky to me. I think they were actively trying to shop out and just didn't land, you know, accordingly. I mean, that clock went all the way down before you saw pick was in. So that means they're making moves, but I'm still perplexed. Love the position addressing. I put that as their highest need. Thought they could have addressed it in first round, but I am plenty pleased with Renardo. My issue is going to be, where do you want to put him? If we were going to take a corner, second, third, fourth round of this draft, I was really hoping they were somebody that had a lot of experience in the slot, because I want Demo out of the slot. I want him back outside. That's where I think he he was forced into the slot out of necessity, and fortunate for us, he did pretty darn well there. But I think he's a better outside corner. So to me, where do you envision this guy? But I am very high on the player. I'm very high on the pick. I'm very high on the value related to that. I don't care who has him rated a fourth round. This guy is a top 65 pick value guy, in my opinion. And lo and behold, he went at 64 overall.
And, you know, it's interesting. You said, and I thought the same, that when the 49ers made that trade with the Chiefs, that one spot back, so the Chiefs going one spot ahead of them, that the 49ers had to have known who the Chiefs would be taking. Because if they're going up just one pick and you're letting them jump you, I mean, you have to kind of know they're not getting your guy. But John Lynch said they didn't even ask. That the 49ers didn't even ask the Chiefs who they were getting. I don't know.
I don't believe that.
But why would he lie? Why would he lie about that?
I don't know. I think it's just their confidence, or okay, this is what it's telling to me. Like, hey, John Lynch, that's like malpractice. First of all,
that's
like,
what I think. That's what I think too. It's like you have to ask.
That's a fireable offense.
Like, that's a lie. Yeah, it's like, why? It's just a weird thing to lie about at the same time. But
you're picking somebody in the second round that you're telling me that in all your conversations with other GMs around the league, they don't have anything above a 4th round grade on this guy. So like, what are you doing there? Like they asked. There's no, he's being cavalier in that comment. Like, no, we knew we were going to get our guy, blah, blah, blah. Okay. If that is actually true, Jed York, I'm telling you here that is a fireable offense to John Lynch. Go beg and plead back with the Washington Commanders and get Adam Peters back in this office immediately. They asked. There's no way they didn't. Like, there's no way you didn't.
So it's funny because there was a little run on tackles, leading up to that pick. And I thought to myself, the Chiefs are going to move up. Like, I knew they were going to move up. I didn't know that they were going to move up to the 49ers spot because I thought in my mind the 49ers would take a tackle. And I actually thought the 49ers were interested in taking Kingsley Suamataia as well. But maybe the 49ers felt like they didn't need to ask because it had been reported that the Chiefs had interest in Suamataia. So maybe they already knew and they didn't feel like they needed to ask there. Again, there was a run on tackles happening, so they probably in their mind figured that would be the pick. But yeah, I mean, in any case, I guess it was clearly the 49ers weren't interested in drafting Suamataia, or they would have at that spot is kind of what I think. But going back to Renardo Green, I mean, in his presser, he was kind of asked if he got a sense when he spoke with the 49ers where they might envision him. And, he said kind of sort of that they talked about it. And, he mentioned he can play all 3 positions in the secondary, corner, nickel, or safety. He could do it all. He mentioned the 2 years he had of experience playing at the nickel spot in 2020 and 2021. And he said at FSU at one point they had a joker package where they'd go 3 high safeties and then one of the safeties would drop and become a nickel. And he said that was the role he played in those 3 safety sets. He also mentioned several times, not just in this interview with the media, but also if you guys heard the call, the draft call that the 49ers made to him, he mentioned several times that they got a dog. So he definitely has that dog mentality. As a corner, as a DB, I feel like you have to think of yourself very highly like that. You have to be a dog and know you're a dog because that translates in the way that you play. And I think it does with Renardo as well. So I'm excited to see what the 49ers do with him. And again, the versatility just opens up the possibilities of where he can line up. So I mean, I think no matter where he ends up lining up, he's probably going to get some opportunities this year as well. I mean, I don't know about this year, quite honestly, Weston. I know you said that, this year you see him getting on the field. It's certainly possible. Definitely possible. Maybe certain matchups. I know that was something that the 49ers kind of mentioned. But yeah, they got a lot of corners, at least for 2024. So maybe training camp's gonna tell us a lot. But the guy certainly has no shortage of confidence. But let's get to the next group here because we're only on pick 3.
This is moving at the pace of the draft itself.
Yeah, pretty much. But this is good. I mean, we have a lot to say about these guys, and I think that's a good thing. We're excited about these picks. So in the 3rd round, the 49ers selected Dominick Puni, and this one. To me, this one made me feel a lot better because I'm thinking to myself, okay, the 49ers hadn't drafted a tackle with the 2nd round pick. I think I don't want to say they panicked there, but I was panicking, as a not seeing them get a tackle because I felt like their window of getting one kind of closed. Oh, I'm sorry. It's supposed to be Puni's RES, but I'll fix that. But yeah, I mean, I was just happy they got an offensive lineman. Like I know Puni played, offensive tackle in college, but I think he projects to be more of a guard at the next level. So he's not a tackle. He's not going to be a tackle for this team, but I was still happy that they got an offensive lineman anyway. So for me, just the value that they got out of him at pick 86 it was, and they moved up for him. I liked it. Like, I liked the value. It might have not been who they wanted. I do think they wanted a tackle at some point, and I think Rosengarten went literally a pick right before them. I think they would have gone to Rosengarten. They could have moved up for Rosengarten, which they did not. They decided to sit on their hands, and he went right before. So I think there might have been some panic after that. But this was a good recovery, getting Dominick Puni, I thought, a round later. Again, I just thought it was good value.
So you and I talked about how we'll be the first to admit when we don't know a ton about a prospect, right? Or we haven't invested our time into that person just yet. And this would be one for me. Admittedly, I don't watch a lot of Kansas Jayhawk football. And I am not Brad Graham, who's the O-line resident guru for the San Francisco 49ers and the content creators. Just not a position that I spend a lot of the time evaluating, if you will, outside of more of some obvious names. I agree with you. I think if Rosengarten was there, they make the pick. But at this point, when you're starting to draft the back half of the third round and beyond, you have 3, 4, 5 names right there that you're going to be comfortable taking into that spot if you're not sliding up to grab somebody. Common theme here, though, like a guy who's got experience at all. Who does that remind you of? That is a former 49er, but Daniel Brunskill, right? Like, you could put him anywhere in a pinch, and if this is going to be the working man's or the poor man's version of Daniel Brunskill in the short term, another guy that I think will sneak his way onto the 53 just because of that versatility that he provides. Again, I can't sit here and talk to you about his violent hands and light feet or whatever it is. I get a lot of my information on the O-line from Brad. I'm just shout out to Brad, does phenomenal work. And I've been watching some of his cut-ups, and it looks good, right? It looks promising on what this guy can provide. The reality is he probably slots really well, as a guard, maybe even a center long-term, but we know he has experience at all of that. But this still ignores the issue. To me, the bigger problem, yes, guard was on display being an issue, but I thought Feliciano had a good year last year. We all remember the play that we want to blame the guard for in the Super Bowl, and Feliciano was not out there on the field because he got nicked up. So I was still looking for the tackle spot. And if I feel like this guy's not going to project to be a tackle, to me, there's still a blatant hole. And tackle is one of those positions for me that I didn't care where you drafted in the draft. It had to be long-term vision, right? Like, is it immediate slot into right tackle, long-term replacement at left tackle? What's the plan going to be there? Trent Williams is not going to play forever. In fact, I'd be surprised if he plays beyond 2024, if I'm being realistic with you. But from what I've seen, what I've gathered, the versatility around him, he's got good size, looks like a strong kid, looks nimble on his feet. Another one with a lot of experience. In terms of starts at the collegiate level. Feels like a good pick, feels like a smart pick, feels like a sound pick, and I think he'll sneak his way onto the 53. Just don't know if he's a quote-unquote immediate contributor.
Yeah, I don't think that he will be, just because I don't think there's an immediate need right now at guard. Now, again, beyond 2024, there definitely is. You have John Feliciano slated as the starting right guard this season. Beyond that, I think spots definitely open. Aaron Banks as well. This is his final year, and so both of those guard spots are going to be, free for competition after 2024. And so that's when I think Puni's going to get an opportunity. But I think he's ready to play. I mean, again, he has experience. He has a little bit less experience than a lot of the guys that they drafted in terms of how many games he's played. But, just based on the stats, dude, he didn't allow a sack in 2 seasons.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
Kansas, that'll do, right? That'll do. And so that when I saw that, I was excited about it, and I was showing some of the clips that Brad had shared. Actually, those clips were from his. If you want to see a game that Puni was pretty good at, Kansas versus Texas, check that one out on YouTube. I thought that was his best game that I saw. I only saw 2 right now. I saw him against Texas and Illinois. Against Illinois, he was good. Obviously, didn't allow a sack in that one. There were just a couple of times when he was like pulling or getting to the second level. His angles weren't all that great. Against Texas, that was clean, like masterclass tape right there. I do like the way he uses his hands. Gives him a chance to like gain control and things like that. I know he had a pretty quick short shuttle, and I know that's something that stands out. That's something that's important to Kyle and Chris Forrester with their offensive linemen. So he can move. He can move out there for a big man, and I think he's agile. So I think that's going to be important for Puni in his fit with the 49ers. So immediate need, maybe not. If there's an injury of any kind, I'm going to feel very confident about, Puni being able to go into any of those guard spots. I believe they even have spoken about him as a center as well. And so that's another intriguing bit to his versatility in this team. And because, Brendel, right? He's not going to be with the team forever too. And so Puni could potentially have the inside track to that going forward. So there's definitely options with him. I like the pick. And so with the first 3 picks, I think the 49ers addressed needs, and I think that was important. And not only did they address needs, but it was with good players. It's not addressing a need with a developmental guy that he has to sit for 1 to 2 years and he has traits, but he's raw. No, none of that. These are guys that are ready to play. And so I think that's something worth being excited about as well.
Well, the 2 of 3 of them need to contribute to have an impact on this team. I mean, this is what happens when you're void of first and second round picks for multiple years. Like, people, I'm not under any guise as to what the intention of the draft is. It's to build the future of your team. But every once in a while, you got to find a few people that can contribute right now, because the 49ers aren't a team that don't care about what's going on until 3 years from now when their plan comes to fruition, right? Like, they are actively trying to be in the Super Bowl year over year over year and actively at the top of, the competitive slate of their conference. You have to stay there, but you have to find contributors. And they candidly have it over the last draft and a half, they haven't found those 5th round gems or anything like that. So this class has to have 2 to 3 of them. Has to. So for you to look back on it a year from now, 2 years from now, to say that was a good draft class.
And the reason I'm optimistic about this draft class compared to, the ones in the last 2-3 years is because I think that, like I said, these guys are ready. A lot of these guys, I don't feel like I had to convince myself of these picks. I think right off the bat, I could see the vision with them and I can see them being able to play right away. Now, as far as them getting that opportunity, I don't know, but it's not like one of those things where I'd be scared if any of these guys did get an opportunity,
Totally.
And that's important because you are going to have those instances where your starters do get hurt. And if anyone gets hurt, I want these guys starting in their place because I want them to be ready for 2025, right? Oh. And I think they will be, but I also want them to, cut their teeth a little bit and get their reps before that.
Yeah.
So I'd feel even better. So I'm excited about this draft. I'm optimistic about it more so than I have been for the last few years. So I think it's solid. Let's go to the round 4 pick. One of the 3 round 4 picks that the 49ers had. Here's to hoping round 4 is the new round 5 for the 49ers because they didn't have a round 5 pick this year, but they had 3 in the 4th. We have Malik Mustapha out of Wake Forest, a safety. So this one was one. So I was watching him a little before we went live. Again, I haven't gotten the chance to get to everyone yet. So Malik is kind of where I'm at right now. So I only got to watch a little bit of like one game. So my opinion on him isn't too in depth. But he's definitely quick and aggressive coming downhill. I like him weaving through traffic, like he could do that. And one of the things I heard about him the most is that he's one of the best tacklers of the draft, right? And if you're a safety, you better be able to tackle, right? So that's something that is exciting about him. He was a team captain. I wouldn't be surprised if he was a gold helmet guy for the 49ers. For some reason this year, they didn't want to really go into specifics about any of these guys being a gold helmet or not. Makes you think maybe they didn't get as many as they would have liked. But it wouldn't surprise me if Mustapha was one of those guys. And yeah, I think he fits with what the 49ers like to do on defense as well. The question is like how does this impact Hufanga, right? I mean, obviously they needed safety depth, but Hufanga's on a contract year, so it will make things really interesting going into this season, what Mustapha looks like and if he can make things interesting for the 49ers going forward.
Yeah. I'm really intrigued about what this means for Huff as well, just because ordinarily a player playing on a contract year with a high profile like Huff does, being a all-pro, right? Like he has earned that nod. So he's sought after in the league. Normally they play their best ball during contract year under normal circumstances. Coming off an ACL clearly gives me cause for concern. Steph, I said before that Renardo Green was my favorite pick. Malik Mustapha is the best player that the 49ers drafted in this particular draft. Guy, you just saw it on the RAS score. He's uber athletic. And there's just something he has that can't be taught. I would say that Jair Brown's got a little bit of this in him. Huff has got a little bit of this in him as well. There are just some guys who just have a nose for finding the football. And Mustapha is always finding the football. More, I think I don't want to mislead anybody here. His strength is not necessarily in coverage, right? So like I feel like he's going to have some deficits like Hufanga has to his game, where we felt that Hufanga was a liability. He's got splash plays, but in traditional coverage, he tends to be a little bit of a liability. I think there are those concerns around Mustapha, but I just think the way he plays the game, the brand of football, like I think early, this is your guy that you might see 3 safety sets, right? And let Huff play more of that rogue, linebacker, a little closer to the line. Let these guys be the third layer, and they're going to come up and they're going to hit you. Him and Brown, they're going to come up, they're going to find you, they're going to hit you. And you mentioned about tackling. I feel the same way about tackling when I talk about wide receivers' hands. Like we say, that wide receiver's got great hands. That guy's a great tackler. To me, those things actually all pull back to mentals. Hands is all about concentration, never taking your eye on the ball, looking it in, going to get it at its highest point. It's all a mentality. Tackling, like blocking, is a mentality. And he arrives on scene, like Callie just said, with bad intentions, expecting to wrap and tackle and take you down. And that's a swagger. That's a moxie. That's just a mentality he plays with. I won't belabor the point. I'm just going to go back and say what I said before. Renardo Green, my favorite pick for the 49ers in terms of like value, slot, etc. Malik Mustapha, best football player that they drafted in this draft.
I love it. And here you can see in his presser with the media, he was asked to describe his style of football and what the 49ers are getting. He said, quote, "I'm a downhill speed, tenacity ball player that plays with a lot of fire. I'm able to line up pretty much everywhere. Just watching the film, I'm able to impact the game on all levels of the football. I'm pretty sure the 49ers have a plan for me. I really feel comfortable in a lot of spots, being able to show that versatility during my time at Wake Forest. So versatility, once again, is the name of the game here with Mustapha, and he's also a dog. So yeah, I have liked what I've seen from him so far. And Yan here mentioned that there's a 20-minute interview to a Seahawks content creator. So a Seahawks content creator did an interview with Malik Mustapha, Rob Statton. So if you guys look that up on YouTube, check it out. And I, as someone who did a couple of, interviews in the off season, anytime I can highlight another content creator who's done the same, and, I'll do that. By the way, Mason Pline, who the 49ers signed as an undrafted free agent, one of the guys I interviewed this off season. So that's on my channel. Make sure you guys check that out. But yeah, definitely excited about this. Love it. Now, hey, Kyle Shanahan could not resist himself from getting a running back this year, but I have to imagine, and I could just imagine the conversations that ensued, because Kyle probably wanted to take Isaac Guerendo in the 3rd round, and everyone was just like, absolutely not, Kyle. Like, there's bad juju around that. You cannot. We will not do that. Sorry.
And there he is in the 4th round.
And he was probably like, fine.
Yeah.
But they're like, Kyle, if he ends up being there for one of our 4th round picks, we'll do it. All right. So he was there at a pick 129. The 49ers traded up actually for that pick with the Jets, I believe. And the Jets would have made sense for Guerendo as well. So maybe that's part of the reason the 49ers felt like they needed to make that move when they did. But you can see why the 49ers would have been interested in Guerendo. I mean, speed. We're looking at his RES score, and it's 9.90 out of 100. The speed just jumps off. It's in the elite category for him. And when you think about what this offense was with the speed guy like Raheem Mostert, we miss that. We miss that. Christian McCaffrey is Christian McCaffrey. I mean, McCaffrey is awesome and the best in the game in his own right. But that home run hitting ability for a running back is, I think, huge for this team, and being able to maximize the outside zone. I think Isaac Guerendo is like the perfect Kyle Shanahan running back for that. Right. And so I think it brings a new element, a change of pace from Christian McCaffrey. And that'll be exciting, because I think Guerendo is the kind of running back that probably the only kind of running back that would make Kyle Shanahan put Christian McCaffrey on the sidelines a couple of plays a game. That currently he hates taking McCaffrey off the field, and McCaffrey hates it too. But Guerendo's one of the guy who has something else. He has that speed that I think you want on the field every once in a while. So having that 1-2 punch, I think is going to be big for this team going forward. I'm excited to see what this could look like. Yeah.
I am excited as well. I am less enthusiastic about Kyle Shanahan just drafting a running back, because this is just so Kyle Shanahan. To the point where they even joked about it, Steph, like, I think it was after the 1st round with their press conference, or maybe it was right before the 1st round, where like Kyle made jokes like, yeah, and then we'll just, we'll trade into the 3rd round and I'll take a running back, ha ha ha, like knowing that it hasn't worked out. Like Lynch even joked, yeah, we'll just trade all of our picks and get into the 5th round because that's where we're the best, and find Kittles and Greenlaws and fill in the blank.
They know the trends.
But
they know the trends.
The 4th round's not much better. The last 4th round running back, I won't even mention names, but Kyle pounded the table, and he didn't stick around all that long. In fact, he left football, right? Like, he didn't just not make teams. Like, he left football entirely. But here, he is a home run ball waiting to happen. This is Mostert. This is literally the answer to no longer having Raheem Mostert. This is one cut and go. See the hole, make them catch you. That is drastically different game than Christian McCaffrey has. Christian McCaffrey can one cut and go, but he's not a home run ball. He will get hawked. He will gas. That's not his game. This guy's a 4.3 40 guy. That's lightning. Can he find the hole? Right? That's what's going to come down to. We were lucky he found holes, right? And he blew it off the top. But this adds another dimension to the game. Outside runs, right? Just another explosive weapon to have on the field. But to me, this spells doom for Elijah Mitchell on the 49ers roster. Like, I think it's over. I think Mason's the guy who sticks around. Maybe even the undrafted kid, Schrader, sticks around. But I think this is like, hey, like, Elijah, like, we love you. You did great things in 21. Like, you were so impactful in the offense, but you can't stay right. You can't stay healthy, and I can't keep you on this roster for a game here and a game there. To me, that's what I think it spells. It spells the end for not Mason. I think it's Mitchell that it spells, because then it becomes redundant, right? Because we always talked about Mitchell had speed, but we never saw like home run speed. Like, he ran a strong 40. He just never took any to the house. This guy's a home run. And I'm not saying the home run value of the pick, but he is literally probably going to be all or nothing, right? They're not going to abuse him through the tackles. The assignment's going to be simple. See the hole, cut and go.
The interesting thing about Isaac Guerendo is that he dealt with some injuries in college as well. Yep. In 2019, he missed the first 8 games with a hamstring injury. 2020 missed the final 6 games with a hamstring injury. It was also the pandemic shortened season. In 2021, missed the final 9 games with the left foot. So not only was he missing games, but a large stretch of games, which is definitely a concern as well, which is why, in the draft guide, Dane Brugler's draft guide, I mean, he says his NFL resume will far outshine what he did in college if he can stay healthy, and so that's big. I do agree. I think Elijah Mitchell, like, you can't depend on him. His time is up. I just hope the same is true for, I just hope Isaac Guerendo can stay healthy, I will share a bit of what Kyle Shanahan likes about, let's see, Guerendo. I'll just play the audio right here. Let's see if...
Steph coming with all the props today. We got slides, audios.
I love his speed. Yeah, we think he's got a lot of speed. All our backs can run, but it's nice to add one who possibly can run a little bit faster, just for the change of pace and things like that. Like his running style. His running style, I think, is similar to Elijah's and the style that he runs with, and he's built that way. And like the 40 that he has.
Did you want to add speed in general to your offense this offseason?
No, we didn't make a blanket statement like that, but it was we wanted to add some speed to the running back room if we could.
So, I mean, even Kyle himself kind of projected the similarities between Guerendo and Elijah Mitchell. So that right there could even tell you like what that means for Mitchell going forward. But yeah, I mean, I there's something you can't teach, and that is speed. And that is what makes Guerendo different than the other running backs that the 49ers have selected in the 3rd round and in the 4th round. So I'm more optimistic about those about Guerendo than I was those guys to begin with.
Totally.
So. All right. Another 4th round pick, Jacob Cowing. Speaking of speed, yep. I mean, I don't want to say it's the only thing Cowing does, but it's a huge part of his game. And if you see the RAS score, I mean, size is a limitation, right? But the speed is elite, and it's definitely helped him out in his college career, and there's no reason to believe that can't continue in the NFL as well. I definitely need to watch more of Jacob Cowing. I'm not going to lie to you guys, but I'm excited about the 49ers adding more speed. And I think you can say that Pearsall maybe projects as more of a slot guy. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think Pearsall could do both inside and outside, and he has that versatility. Cowing probably slated to only be a slot in the NFL, which, I mean, that's Juwan Jennings' role, right? So I think it'll work nicely going forward, having that speed element, guys who will be able to get open, not just open, but open quickly.
Yeah. He and Juwan are the complete opposite of each other in slot world, right? Juwan is big. He's kind of cumbersome when he's running his routes, right? Like it just kind of like, he's just very, and then like Cowing is, certainly undersized at the NFL level, but everything is kind of like crisp and precise. And like you said, just a speed element. You would never define Juwan Jennings as fast. It's just going to be like, there's a lot of these guys in the NFL right now that are undersized, that are trying to make rosters and present, nasty matchups out of the slot. Can he just play his way in? And what does he look like with the ball in his hands? All the highlights, et cetera, all look good, right? All look like he does the right thing with the ball in his hands and can be part of the Yak family, if you will. It's just going to be a matter of like, what else can he do? We talked about Pearsall struggling to crack the lineup, right? And then you got Cowing, like, what else can he be an answer in your return game? Then he's one step closer if he can be. He's not going to play a whole lot of special teams outside of the return game. So if he can't do that, the likelihood of him cracking the lineup in this year, maybe even in next year, it probably doesn't even come to fruition until they're paper thin at the wide receiver position. But I do like the mismatch that he presents if he can find his way onto the field in that slot. Like, think about it. Like, just think of a scenario. You got Debo, Ayuk, you got Kittle, you got Juszczyk, you got McCaffrey, right? Like, you got these guys floating around, and you got a combination of four of them, and then Cowing's your fifth, depending upon where you have them. Like, that guy's not getting the best match, the best player on the defensive side matching up across from him, right? Like, you're going to be able to expose it. And he's got the speed to take the top off. So we'll see.
This is another pick that probably spells the end of Danny Gray in his time.
Danny Gray's done. Not probably.
Yeah. He's
R.I.P. Danny Gray.
I was just trying to be, politically correct there. He's like, no. All right. Well, Kyle Shanahan was asked what he likes about Jacob Cowing's game. So let's hear what he had to say about him.
What do you like about Jacob Cowing?
They're similar to what we got when Ricky, and that there's not a route that he can't run. Starts outside the numbers, and he's got the speed to get on top of people and threaten with a go. He's got the quickness. Inside, he'd be a big problem with just how shifty he is. He can run screens and things like that. Very good punt returner. For his lack of size, he makes up with mentality. His mindset, when he does cut, he's always accelerating out of a cut. He's trying to violently go through people. And when you're smaller, you hope they're faster and quicker, which he is. And anything that you want to knock on a smaller guy, he makes up for in his mindset.
I love that he did acknowledge that there is some overlap between Pearsall and Cowing, but what I did like about what he said is there isn't a route he can't run. So he said in that aspect, he's like Pearsall. And that's huge, because if you kind of see this as a one-to-one swap of Juwan Jennings, that's already kind of an upgrade over Jennings. I mean, you mentioned it. Cumbersome was the word you used. That was a good one. But Cowing is a different kind of slot receiver, and he has a full route tree that he can work with, right? So that already, increases his value in that spot, I think. So I'm excited about it and what they can cook up for him. Again, like, who knows, maybe we see more 4 wide receiver sets this year. I don't know. Have Brock throwing the ball a little bit more?
It's funny. I've had a bunch of people who've reached out to me to say that this should be our favorite pick, and they're high on this player etc. I don't know if I subscribe to that, to be honest with you, but like that's telling, right? That there are people out there that are like, no, we like this guy. We wish, we had him on our team, etc. And I'm not talking about like my aunts and uncles who watch football on Sunday. I'm talking about some people who are pretty close to the game that are really high on this individual. I just don't like, my eyes don't tell me that just yet. And I'm just trying to see and understand where the place is for him. But I do believe with Pearsall, I think Pearsall, Cowing, the receivers that are already on the roster, there is an opportunity here for Kyle to get into the lab a little bit and cook up some things that we've never seen from a formation perspective, a personnel package perspective. Gives him an opportunity to be creative. So I'm very excited at that aspect, because when he's at his most creative, boy, this offense is humming. Between the Guerendo, the Cowing, the Pearsall, this tells me that Kyle wasn't satisfied with averaging 29.5 points a game. He wants to average 35 points a game next year. That's how I'm reading between the lines.
Well, I think in a sense there were, and it's crazy because yes, they did average that many points per game, and that's really good. But I think in a sense, maybe he feels like the NFL defenses were maybe starting to catch up to some of the things the 49ers were doing with the current personnel that they had. I mean, I think certain players have certain limitations to them as far as what they can do. And so this opens up some new things that, defenses haven't seen this 49ers offense with. I mean, Danny Gray, I think the vision was there, adding the speed element. But the thing with Danny Gray is like he didn't really have a route tree beyond like running a go route or like a post, and so I pay attention to little things like that Kyle mentions, and whether or not he's thinking about another player on the team not doing that one thing, like creating separation or, being able to run every route. I think that is part of what attracts Kyle to those players is we don't have that yet. We don't have that on this team currently. I need it, and that's the value that this player brings. Jacob Cowing is a guy I haven't gotten around to watching yet, but based on what I've been hearing about him, based on the speed, like I'm looking forward to seeing, again, what Kyle can cook up, so yeah. I mean, in 4th round pick, I mean, why not? Kind of like this next guy, Jarrett Kingston. He was the 49ers 6th round pick. And so at this point, as John Lynch had mentioned going into the draft, like, NFL teams probably not in love with the depth of the draft, So going into these 6 and 7 rounds, you're not super excited about these players, but what I like about Jarrett Kingston, they're banking on athleticism here, and his RAS score is 9.92 out of 10. And for a guard, like that's pretty impressive. His shuttle is in a 9.66 score, so that's really high. 4.47 shuttle, and for a big man, again, it's pretty impressive. So I'm okay with like banking on athleticism that late and just seeing what it could do for you.
He's another one who's played a lot of football, 37 games at Washington State before transferring to USC. All of these picks have seen, I think Cowing had like over 51 games that he played in college. That's a lot of college football. Like, it's not the one-hit wonders who played a 13-game season, overachieved, get drafted in the first round, and then you never hear from these players again. I don't have an opinion on Jarrett Kingston, and that's not the player or whatever. I think for me, happy with the positional value. You joked about how Mike was saying they went 4 hours, right, in between like picks, not having that pick in the 5th round and jumping up earlier into the 4th round. But I think this is where you're supposed to be finding guys that could, have great upside, raw, like real athletic ability, but maybe raw traits and other things that become more of a a project player for you, because you don't expect your lineman drafted in the 6th round is going to make an immediate impact. He's probably not going to make the 53, right? He sounds like somebody who's probably going to get stashed on the practice squad, which is supposed to happen on a team that's this deep. And oh, by the way, if he has a stellar camp and wows everybody and knocks your socks off, like, fantastic, right? Like, what's a better scenario than that? So I'm fine with the player. Obviously, he played big time college football, right? Like USC, like he was literally blocking for the number 1 overall pick in the draft and the previous year's Heisman Trophy winner, right? So like he's seen competitive ball. He's played well. I've seen some other linemen, guys like Baldy, et cetera, say they're a little shocked that he went as late like as he did, which is all bodes well. But love utilizing these late round picks to try to find maybe some projects that could be diamonds in the rough this year, next year, 3 years from now to bolster that offensive line. Because no matter what you say, the game is still played and won in the trenches.
Yeah, and I think again, going for that kind of upside this late is ideal. Like I'm okay with the developmental pick in the 6th round. My issue in drafts prior were we were seeing developmental picks in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, like
Totally.
rounds they should not be you should be getting developmental guys. So I'm okay with this, and he's a Northern California guy. So hey, maybe there's something in that water.
A lot. Lead in that water.
Don't drink it.
No.
All right, we're down to the 49ers' 8th pick of the draft in round 7, linebacker Tatum Bethune out of FSU. Now his RES score is not gonna exactly, it's not gonna excite you. I'll just say that. And again, I mean, we're in the 7th round. We're probably already looking at guys who aren't going to make the 53. I did want the 49ers to draft linebacker just because I think it's one of those positions you should look to draft every year or bring in every year if you can. And the 49ers have done a good job of like getting guys who, maybe don't seem like, you don't really hear their name a whole lot, but they end up being something on this team. They end up looking nice in camp, right? So I think Tatum Bethune has potential just for that reason.
Yeah. Don't have any disillusions ever about a 7th round pick, unless it's Brock Purdy, of course, right? So now we lose all credibility saying like discrediting any round pick. But I have watched a lot of Bethune. There's a lot of people that will tell you like of the 2 that have been picked from Florida State that they like Bethune better than they like Renardo Green. I'm not one of them. What I can tell you is Bethune is an instinctive player. Like another guy, Steph, you're talking about 59 games he's played in college. So he started and played 3 seasons at UCF. And we're seeing this more now with the COVID year and NIL, like all those things. Like these guys are playing more ball. They're more – some of them are going to make more in college than they're going to make in the NFL, right? Like, so they're going to stick around and earn some paychecks while they can. But he's a guy who he's not fast. He plays with burst, right? Like he's not a speed guy. He's just instinctive. Another guy who can find the football. What I can tell you is he plays without fear for an undersized guy. He will come in and he will try to lump you. I think tackling needs improvement, but I'll always rely on just another guy, something that you can't teach, just seems to have a nose for finding the ball carrier. Just, but he's not, that worked at Florida State. Don't know how that's going to work at the NFL level, just given his size and some of his physical limitations. Yeah. He's not a burner. He's not going to run sideline to sideline. He's played at a higher level in college because I think he has seen a lot of football. That instinct comes into play. His opportunity here is like, what's your contribution on special teams? No disillusion. Like he's not uprooting unless he has some like monster camp. And we see this all the time. We see folks who have better professional careers than they did collegiate careers. Like it happens all the time. I'm just not under any disillusion that Tatum Bethune's going to be one of those guys. Like the player, but he needs to have immediate special teams contribution, but another guy that's probably going to find himself on another team's roster at the start of the season. I don't even think he sticks around for the practice squad.
Yeah, I mean, that's being real. And I think we got to be real about where this roster is currently and the uphill battle that some of these guys would have to climb in order to crack the 53. So yeah, I think that's real. I haven't gotten around to watching him at all. So, glad that you had and had that insight for us.
By default, mind you, right? This wasn't like an after the fact. This was just like, hey, I know, I distinctly remember watching number 15 play on the defense for the Florida State, right? Like, and he's got good tape. Like, you can go find things that look good. I mean, you could do that for anybody, but he will show up well on tape for you. That's why he was drafted in the first place, right? Like, you don't let that guy go pick and choose his team. If there's something that you covet, you get him. Period, point blank. My concerns are more like, how much does this translate? He's going to say all the right things. He's going to do all the right things. He will be another one that tell you the 49ers got a dog. They got a dog. They got a dog. They're not lying. It's just, you said it, Steph. It's an uphill battle for a lot of these guys based on the positions that they play to make the roster.
Yeah, got to be realistic. All right. Well, we've been here over an hour. Appreciate everyone that has, been tuned in and has watched any part of this. Really appreciate it. Just one last thing before we head out of here. I mean, you see some of the draft grades that different publications have given the 49ers, and it's kind of like all over the place. Let's just say there aren't any A's, all right, for the 49ers. But I would like to ask you, Weston, what would you grade this 49ers draft?
B-.
B-, right? I give it a B. I give it a B+. And again, I think I'm more optimistic about this current draft than the last 2-3 years. Again, haven't felt like I've had to convince myself too much of any of the picks. Really, the only one was maybe Pearsall, just because of, maybe feeling like he went a little earlier than he should have. But again, the more I saw him, the less it mattered for me. So overall, yeah, I'm going to give it a B+, and I think that's fair.
Yeah, listen, for me, again, when somebody asked me, like, what do you grade something? I'm only doing it under the guise and the lens of, like, how I would have done it, right? You know what I mean? And I think they addressed positions of need. I would have done it in different order. I would have done it with different players, but you got to give them credit. You can see some of the short-term vision for some of these people, some of the long-terms, and I will say this about the players that I am aware of, they just feel like 49ers, right? Like the ones that I knew offhand, like they just feel like 49ers. And that's what it's all about. You're building a team, you're building a locker room, you're building people that want to buy in. Like you want to stack as many of those players as you can.
You see the vision. And I think that's important. Being able to see a pick and immediate be like, yeah, I see the fit with this team. And you're not scratching your head wondering what this team was thinking, so that's the difference for me in this draft and a couple of the ones prior. So yeah, I'm happy with it. And I'll continue to talk about this draft this week. Tomorrow, slated to have Ryan Roberts, NFL draft analyst, on the pod. Nice. Bonus draft episode to just recap it from his perspective. He's a Rams fan, but maybe that'll make his opinion. He's pretty objective when it comes to the draft. So we'll talk about that and what he thought about the 49ers picks. And then on Wednesday, I'm back with Desi, and then I'll also have Emery Hunt, another NFL draft analyst. Emery is on, he goes to all of the bowl games in the offseason, like every single one. The dude is grinding. And, a lot of those are back-to-back. So, he grinds in the offseason. He knows a lot of those smaller school prospects. So a lot of respect to him and his work. I can't wait to see what he says about the undrafted free agents the 49ers signed. That's what we're going to be talking about on Wednesday with him. So make sure you guys tune into that. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet, not just mine, but Weston's as well. Make sure you like the video if you haven't yet. Audio listeners, leave a review, leave a rating. Always appreciate it. But for now, for me, from Weston, have a good rest of your Monday, folks. Peace.